From McClatchy Newspapers. Not so long ago, Wikileaks founder Julian Assange could count on American journalists to support his campaign to publish secret documents that banks and governments didn't want the world to see.
I'd also like to say that our work with Wikileaks continues unabated, and we are stepping up our publishing for matters related to Cablegate and other materials. Those will shortly be occurring through our newspaper partners around the world, big and small newspapers and some human rights organizations.
But just 3 years after a major court confrontation that saw many of America's most important journalism organizations file briefs on Wikileaks' behalf, much of the U.S. journalistic community has shunned Assange, even as reporters write scores, if not hundreds of stories based on Wikileaks' trove of leaked State Department cables. Some call him a traitor, responsible for what's arguably one of the biggest U.S. national security breaches ever. Others say a man who calls for government transparency has been too opaque about how he obtained the documents. The Freedom of the Press Committee of the Overseas Press Club of America in New York City declared him, quote, "not one of us." The Associated Press, meanwhile, which once filed legal briefs on Assange's behalf, refuses to comment about him. And the National Press Club in Washington, the venue less than a year ago for an Assange news conference, has decided not to speak out about the possibility that he'll be charged with a crime. With a few notable exceptions, it's been left to foreign journalism organizations to offer the loudest calls for the U.S. to recognize Wikileaks and Assange's right to publish under the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment. Assange supporters see the ambivalence of American journalists as inviting other government efforts that could lead one day to the prosecution of journalists for doing something that happens fairly routinely, now writing news stories based on leaked government documents. Glenn Greenwald, a lawyer and media critic who writes for the online journal Salon.com, said, quote, "Bob Woodward has probably become one of the richest journalists in history by publishing classified documents in book after book. And yet no one would suggest that Bob Woodward be prosecuted because Woodward is accepted in the halls of Washington. There is no way of prosecuting Julian Assange without harming investigative journalism." Woodward's newspaper, The Washington Post, however, is one of the few that editorialized against prosecuting Assange.